Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal.
We all know, but still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation,
hospital services,
our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison.
As of 2017, 6 major conglomerates lorded over mainstream media, be it broadcast, print, internet, radio, or film. Very little existed outside of their umbrellas. The big 6 at the time were Time Warner, Comcast, Disney, Sony, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, and National Amusements, now Paramount Global. It is a stretch to call these companies competitors per se, as even these umbrella companies are all mutually owned by the world's largest institutional investors, asset managers like BlackRock Inc., the Vanguard Group, State Street, and Berkshire Hathaway, whose representatives share mutual agendas and remain regular fixtures in various globalist think tanks.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. What we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted, okay?
We're doing the same thing.
And so it's just, you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
BlackRock in particular exercises tremendous financial power through an array of social, environmental, and economic policy frameworks. BlackRock and their so-called competitors mutually enforce the will and agendas of the international think tank class onto the entirety of the corporate world. The big 6 media companies, despite public perceptions, are just components of one quasi-monopolistic, centralized system of systems.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's
How
totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
At least on paper, the primary mandate of a free press is to act as a counterbalance, to keep rampant establishment powers in check. However, the press in modernity is not only failing in its role of keeping the establishment in check, the press routinely and proactively defends the establishment through illusion, omission, and gaslighting. From CIA smuggling to the creation of ISIS to the countless US-backed regime changes worldwide, these topics are well known and discussed throughout the developing world, yet the average American or news anchor refuses to touch them.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The role of the press in our society is crucial to the population's discernment between truth and fiction. If a nation was to be subverted from within, the press would undoubtedly be the primary weapon leveraged by its adversaries. And this is exactly our current predicament. As a mechanism of fifth-generational news organizations and even individual journalists are often tapped as assets by intelligence agencies seeking to control a narrative. This was the case with German journalist and whistleblower Udo Ulfkott.
Well, I've been a journalist for about 25 years, and I was educated to lie, to betray, and not to tell the truth to the public. It is not right what I have done in the past, to manipulate people, to make propaganda against Russia, and it is not right what my colleagues do and have done in the past, because they are bribed to betray the people, not only in Germany, all over Europe. I just have written in the book how we have betrayed in the past our readers, just to push forward, and because I don't want this anymore. I'm fed up with this propaganda. I was supported by the Central Intelligence Agency, by the CIA. Why? Because I should be pro-American. I'm fed up with it. I don't want to do it anymore.
The Central Intelligence Agency has been a significant force in US and international news media since the end of exerting considerable influence over what the public sees, hears, and reads.
So Anderson, what influence do you think the CIA has when it comes to mainstream media?
Dude, you're being just ridiculous.
To manipulate the news and mainstream media?
So Anderson Cooper has 3 security guards all around him now.
Get just one statement from you.
Researchers have long pointed to Project Mockingbird as the quintessential example of collusion between intelligence and media. Mockingbird emerged from the CIA forerunner, the Office of Strategic Services, which had established a network of journalists and psychological experts by the end of...
Hey Anderson, we had a great interview last time. I was wondering if you get a chance to look into Operation Mockingbird? You know what that is.
You're talking about something, what, from the 1950s, dude?
1970s official declassified program, how the CIA infiltrated the mainstream media from the higher up.
Right.
It's declassified.
The State Department's Office of Policy Coordination, the OPC, led by OSS staffer Frank Wisner, continued several OSS contacts after the war and was absorbed by the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. According to author and historian Lisa Peace, the OPC, quote, became the fastest growing unit within the nascent CIA, rising in personnel from 302 in 1949 to 2,812 in 1952, along with 3,142 overseas contract personnel. In the same period, the budget rose from $4.7 million to $82 million. In 1948, the OPC and Office of Special Operations merged to form the CIA, absorbing OPC media assets. Wisner would officially establish Mockingbird that year. At that time, Frank Wisner was in possession of the top-secret Propaganda Assets Inventory, otherwise known as Wisner's Mighty Wurlitzer, a Rolodex of over 800 news and information entities who were prepared to sing any tune Wisner chose. Wisner was a close associate of CIA Director Allen Dulles. Together they recruited Philip Graham, husband of Washington Post owner Katharine Graham, to run the Mockingbird operation within the industry. The Washington Post would develop into one of the most influential news organizations in the United States, thanks in part to its ties with the CIA.
1/3 of my staff in this task force was covert action, was propagandists, whose professional career jobs was making up stories and finding ways to get them into the press.
An unofficial biography on Graham's wife, titled Catherine the Great, asserts that, quote, by the early 1950s, Wisner owned respected members of the New York Times, Newsweek, CBS, and other communications vehicles. Unfortunately, Philip Graham later committed suicide at the age of 48. His son William Graham followed suit 50 years later.
The idea that it is necessarily nefarious, it's always engaged in overthrowing governments, that's false.
This has gone on 50 or 60 years, where the United States has been involved in overthrowing governments. Mossadegh back in 1953. Nobody knows who Mossadegh was. Democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran. He was overthrown by British and American interest because he threatened oil interest of the British. And as a result of that, the Shah of Iran came in, terrible dictator. As a result of that, you had the Iranian Revolution coming in, and that's where we are today. Unintended consequences.
By the late 1950s, to reduce criticisms leveled against its domestic influence operations, the agency aimed to avoid judicial intervention or congressional monitoring by, quote, infiltrating the groves of academia, the missionary corps, the editorial boards of influential journal and book publishers, and any other quarters where public attitudes could be effectively influenced.
I can assure you that the CIA, when I was there as director, and I'm quite sure it's the same with Mr. McCone, has given these committees full information about what it's doing, how it's spending its money, and how it operates.
Carl Bernstein, one of the journalists who broke the Watergate scandal, in his landmark article, The CIA and the Media, asserted that the CIA had continued its furtive relationship with the press from the 1950s into the late 70s. In this article, Bernstein claimed that there were well-known columnists and broadcast commentators whose, quote, relationships with the CIA go far beyond those normally maintained between reporters and their sources. They are referred to at the agency as known assets and can be counted on to perform a variety of undercover tasks. They are considered receptive to the agency's point of view on various subjects. In 1977, Rolling Stone magazine alleged that one of the most important journalists under the control of Operation Mockingbird was Joseph Alsop, whose articles appeared in over 300 different newspapers. However, the CIA's involvement with the media did not remain limited to print. In 1999, the CIA established a venture capital arm called In-Q-Tel, which sought to, quote, identify and invest in companies developing cutting-edge information technologies that serve United States national security interests. The firm has established financial relationships with Google and Facebook, among many other internet platforms. Quote, while In-Q-Tel originally catered largely to the needs of the CIA, today the firm supports many of the 17 agencies within the US intelligence community, including the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate. In 2012, at an In-Q-Tel meeting, then CIA Director David Petraeus stated that the rapidly developing Internet of Things and smart home appliances would provide the CIA with the ability to spy on any US citizen should they become a person of interest to the spy community.
But you believe you're consistent with the statutes, but there isn't any statute that prohibits your interception of domestic communications.
I believe that's correct.
Nothing further, Mr. Kim.